Okay, we're live. Joining us, I'm excited about this topic. It's my first dive into cannabis, which is going to be one of the tracks at our upcoming RX Influencer Salon. As I have mentioned before, this is our first in-person event. It's going to be in October, the 24th and 25th in St. Louis. And we're going to have 4 tracks: cannabis, compounding, of course, growth and alternative revenue streams, as well as pharmacogenomics. So if anybody's interested, go to our website, pharmasalon.com. Anyway, so I was talking to Craig Batogowski earlier today about participating in our conference on either the cannabis or the compounding track, because he is a compounding pharmacist. And he did have some experience working in or opening up a dispensary, right? Craig, was it a dispensary?
Yes, it's
Cannabis dispensary?
Exactly. So early on in when Illinois first enabled medical marijuana to be dispensed, my business partner and one of my former employees, Joe Friedman, who's actually one of the pioneers of medical cannabis in Illinois, they opened up a pharmacy model of a dispensary specifically for medical care in Illinois.
Anyway, and I just thought the journey was really interesting. And since we're going to be talking about this at the conference, as well as I think a lot of car watching to see where this business is going, I thought it'd be interesting for you to kind of talk a little bit about that experience, what your hopes were, because we were just talking about, all the things that you were really excited to try out. But I'd love to hear, I'd love for you to tell everybody about that and what you ended up having to do and how you ended up having to treat patients. And maybe we can talk a little bit as well about things. As usual, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them as we go along. So Craig, why don't you start with what happened, background and what you did.
Sure. And thank you very much for inviting me, Vivian. To start, so a long time ago, before COVID, we haven't heard of COVID, in Illinois, they were trying to open up medical dispensaries. So the idea in Illinois was to allow patients who have specific conditions, and I think there was only a list of 20 of them, to get access to cannabis-based medicine. My partner at the time, he's passed since, Mark Mandel, and one of my employees at the time, Joe Friedman, they decided to get together and collaborate on opening PDI, Pharmacy Dispensary of Illinois. And they were successful in getting one of the few licenses at the time, specifically for medical cannabis. So as time went on, of course, I didn't have a direct influence there. I had no financial ties to it. It happened to be opening right up the street from my compounding pharmacy. And of course, my business partner and an employee of mine were the ones kind of spearheading the getting it financed and opened, and they were successful. But I had long been an advocate of using cannabis in the appropriate situation and treating cannabis like a drug. It's a natural substance, but it has drug-like properties. And then now that once CBD became widely available, and if you'll remember when Dr. Sanjay Gupta actually started to accept the fact that CBD, there's proven benefits of certain types of uses of CBD, especially in certain types of seizure disorders, especially in children. Once that became widely accepted, the floodgates opened and CBD became everywhere, to the point where I think, CBD is it's a great compound and I would love to use it. And I'll get to that in a second. But it became widely available and accepted. At the very least, the side effects were next to nothing. You could try this out. It might work for your anxiety. It might work for sleep, but it's not going to dig you a deeper hole. It's not going to, put you to sleep for days. It's something that is, at the very least, safe. And the CNN reporting at the time really opened the floodgates. So a little bit later, I got access to something that people are familiar with called Charlotte's Web, CBD isolate. So it's only got CBD in there. It was something that we would use as a topical medication. So Charlotte's Web came available as a topical salve that you can apply to sore muscles if you've worked out a lot. So it became a pretty hot seller at my pharmacy. And of course, at the time, I was able to just dispense it as an over-the-counter supplement. No problems there. A couple years down the road, after Apodolex became FDA approved, so a CBD derived product is something that was actually, so it was FDA approved for that use at very, very high doses, specifically for a very rare seizure disorder in children. Either way, that was like kind of the second step. The FDA has approved CBD for certain uses. Now, hopefully we can get access to this stuff as a compounder. I would love to see what CBD can do for localized inflammation when it's combined with other more traditional drugs like gabapentin and amitriptyline. Trouble is when a company called PCCA, they're a company that provides a lot of compounders with raw ingredients, and they were
Yeah, I think we're all
okay. Everyone knows PCCA. They're fantastic, and they're also great at giving advice too. So they're a great resource of information whenever you run into a problem. Regardless, they offered CBD in its purest form that they can get at the time, and it was something that I thought, oh, fantastic. FDA has approved CBD at those high doses in the form of Apodolex. Now I can get CBD in its raw form and perhaps combine it with the different medications. Before this, I would actually have to put those medications into the Charlotte's Web, the salve that already had, I believe, about 0.75% CBD. Regardless, I wanted to increase the percentage and use it for different things other than just topical salves. And I even had the idea of using it in veterinary use for felines who are having a little bit too much anxiety and using a transdermal form. Regardless, very soon after I bought my first 5 grams of CBD, I believe the DEA warned PCCA that they're not allowed to sell it anymore. In fact, PCCA bought back my 5 grams that I had barely even tapped into. But I thought it would be a good way to try maybe different types of eye drops for people who have chronic dry eye or inflammation of the eye. I thought it would be, again, a great combination with the things I've already been using and putting in the Charlotte's Web, like the gabapentin, amitriptyline, and anti-inflammatories like ketoprofen and diclofenac. So having access to the pure ingredient kind of opened the doors for me to make other things that I knew worked, and combining CBD hopefully would potentiate that. Now, since I wasn't able to do that, since PCCA told me, okay, we're buying back that product, and by the way, you're not supposed to be compounding it with it anyway, that limited my options.
I don't know if you see there's a question from Cortland about that. So and I was going to say, Cortland, we're getting to that. That's part of the story. So go ahead.
And I do see that. So of course, I'm no longer allowed to compound with CBD as it stands right now, at least in Illinois. Again, there could be different states that might have looser regulations. Being specifically warned by the company who sold me the CBD, I kind of took that to heart. So compounding with it right now, even the stuff I was doing with Charlotte's Web, is not going to be accepted by the powers that be at this point. However, Charlotte's Web is an over-the-counter product. Another product that we've used, it's more of an ointment, is called Green Gorilla. It's a little more concentrated, has menthol and eucalyptus in there too. All good anti-inflammatory potential there. So what I've done is the creams that I was using before that seemed to work very well. A good combination is bupivacaine, diclofenac, ketoprofen, and gabapentin. A nice kind of all-inclusive double anti-inflammatory salve that people use on sore joints and painful areas that you don't want to have when you don't want to have systemic, problems that can happen when we're talking about gabapentin specifically. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I would have people use the Charlotte's Web product, a separate over-the-counter product that is sold this way. And then after that has been rubbed in, layer it with the anti-inflammatory that I have, and then you can rub that in. And the base that we use, and I guess since we know everyone here is familiar with PCCA, the lipoderm base, forming micelles around these drugs and hopefully pushing the drugs deeper into the cells or into the skin to get that anti-inflammatory response. I was hoping that layering them at the very least would give you the benefits of both, and hopefully at the most, that lipoderm, that base that's designed to push drugs that have no business going through the skin, it would kind of pick up some of that CBD that was already layered on and through the skin to have that direct anti-inflammatory effect. Mm-hmm. As far as I do see someone mentioning that you can use CBD derived from marijuana. I was told not to use any CBD products.
I thought, wait, what about
Specifically,
hemp? What about hemp?
again,
Can't you use
even
hemp
then, I
derived?
was told.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, repeat that.
I was gonna say,
Well,
I thought that, and I could be wrong. Our connection is.
I was warned not to actually to even use the base, which Charlotte's Web is derived from hemp, not to even put the active, drugs, the gabapentins and whatnot, into that. Selling them separately was fine, but I was kind of warned not to combine them, even though it's just a matter of, I wanted to get my patients access to the active ingredient CBD, but I was unable to actually, use the purified powder to make the salves. And actually, I had an idea of using it to make certain types of eye drops too, that I never got the chance to do because I was warned explicitly not to be doing that, or especially marketing that, because it's just something that can get you in trouble with people who don't want you to use CBD. So that's kind of my experience with it. My partner and my employee were successful in opening a pharmacist-driven dispensary in Illinois, one of the first. Since then, I mean, the business model has changed. Unfortunately, a lot of times when it comes to a dispensary, and no fault of theirs, but the idea is to sell as much product as possible. The pharmacist-driven model was to bring in the patients, get a good, thorough history of what they're going through. There's certain conditions that you probably don't want to actually, use THC, but CBD might be perfectly acceptable. And that was the whole point of this pharmacist model, is to make it so that you have a healthcare professional who's guiding you on what product to pick. They're not, someone who has got very little experience with your specific condition. They're someone who actually can run drug interactions and see what you're using and see how it can actually, make a problem, worse or better. But taking that person's specific history and other drugs that they're using into consideration, as opposed to when you go to a non-medical dispensary now, you're not going to get that feedback. You're not going to get that type of input that can be a lot more helpful for folks who are going through, whether it's cancer or PTSD or even inflammatory bowel disease. The professionals at a pharmacist-driven model are the ones who can determine if the drugs that you're already using that keep you stable, if the combination of CBD, THC, CBN, CBG can actually give you even better results than the conventional drugs.
Okay, great. We have what do you say about Cortland's comment about you can't mix hemp CBD with drugs as an excipient as CBD derived from marijuana? And Joseph, thanks for joining us as well. Feel free. I could find the link to invite you guys.
Well, I mean, as far as
if anybody wants to log,
I guess.
Can I post that in?
You might not be allowed to use the CBD now as like an excipient, as far as like using it like a, like using it like a drug, using it like gabapentin that's been around forever, or a number of other agents that were originally, antidepressants that we see a benefit of using them topically for localized types of neuropathic pain. So yeah, it's a matter of the CBD. I guess you just can't get it in its purified form, at least from PCCA. And usually if they don't have something, I sometimes don't even bother looking at the other chemical companies, because they have the rare, odd items. As soon as they took it off out of their inventory, I just figured it's just a no-go. So the best I could do for my patients is to tell them, get your CBD from here, get the active ingredients, the active, approved drugs in some sort of form, and combine them together on your own. Essentially, the patient's doing their own little miniature compounding, even though they're just mixing two creams together. Well, I mean, that's something that we are still asked to do from time to time. So it's a very simple theory, just the idea of applying the CBD first and using a cream that contains active ingredients and the lipoderm base that I love from PCCA, and hopefully the two of them are going to bring the active drugs that I put in the lipoderm and the CBD directly to the spot where inflammation is present and you want it to kind of put out the fire.
Okay. One of the things we touched on, and I know we try to keep this to 15 minutes, and this is obviously a topic that can take a lot longer. But I just want to, you talked about the pharmacy being acquired and a lot of small dispensaries, I guess, being acquired by larger ones like Cresco. And what do you think that's going to, and then also if the FDA marijuana legal on a federal level, I mean, what do you think these things do to the industry? Was that too robust of a question for now?
Well, sure, but that last part you said, once the FDA approves it, I guess that wall comes down between what I'm like right now. I can't have THC or CBD in my store unless it's a CBD already prepackaged product. As long as I'm not making it, I can still dispense it. The CBD products, I can't dispense any THC products in my pharmacy. However, so if the FDA approves a THC or CBD product or allows pharmacists to actually dispense it, well, then that wall kind of breaks down, and then you can get the healthcare professional guidance that some of these patients need for a product selection. Now, in lieu of that, it doesn't happen right now, and right now I tell people to go to a dispensary, and I might have a little bit of input on which type of products they choose to get. And it looks like it's something that I can have an influence on these patients after they come to me. They get a product, or even if they don't get a product from me, it's something I'm very happy to share my knowledge of the active ingredients in hemp or in cannabis that can be beneficial to them. So like one of the cases that I often recommend is folks who have a history of PTSD. Let's say a lot of people come to us who are veterans who might have nightmares and stuff like that. And I often recommend when you're just getting into it, if you haven't used the cannabis product, and if the only ones you have used are something that is combustible, which I think is just not the best form of using any sort of cannabis, anything that needs to be lit and smoked and stuff like that. I would like to get specific doses, and I recommend that they use specific doses and they start something that is more CBD dominant so that they're less likely to have a flare-up of types of PTSD symptoms that are possible. So it doesn't mean they can't use THC, but it's something that I often recommend. It's just, something to try. If they're going to try something CBD dominant, or maybe even try one of my products that contains CBD isolates or hemp-derived products that might be a spectrum, but has very little or immeasurable THC.
Okay, great. We're getting some other recommendations for other people to talk about this topic, so that's great. I know Joe wanted you to mention the educational events that you guys coordinated together.
Oh, so at Mark Drugs, we used to have event when PDI, the dispensary, was being opened, and even before it was opened. I would invite Joe. At the time, he had another pharmacist, Nick, and I lose the last name. Also, and he was someone they're experts at how cannabis can be used for different types of conditions. And at the time, remember, in Illinois, we were limited to, I believe, 20 specific conditions. And there was a lot of backflips and hoops you had to jump through to get this medical permission slip, if you will, to enter a dispensary. Now, you get this medical card and you're able to go to a dispensary, but still, I would invite people to our pharmacy as a jumping off point to get familiar to what cannabis can do and its limitations. That's important too. Understand, just like any other drug, it's fantastic when it works, and it's when it's dosed correctly for the right patient. Dosed incorrectly, used without any guidance or without any at least like dosing. And that's what I like about edibles and certain types of products, that this is 5 milligrams of THC and 10 milligrams of CBD, and you can adjust them independently and very methodically to see if you're getting the results that you want. When you were getting it before, it may Nick Salome. Thank you, Joe. All right, I'm using my phone somewhere, but so Joe and Nick would come to our store just to introduce the possibility of cannabis as an option for patients who needed it, or even to turn off patients who thought about it, but it just wasn't for them. That's just as important as keeping people away from cannabis who aren't good candidates is as important as making sure the patients who can benefit from this herb that's been with us for millennia, and the potential benefits of it. So that was the approach that the pharmacist model started at PDI pharmacies in Illinois, where PDI dispensaries, sorry, that it's something that is available, and people were often scared of the stigma. That stigma is almost entirely gone now, but still, just because you go to a dispensary, it's great that you're able to get certain types of different products. But having that healthcare professional really look over the drugs that you absolutely do need for whatever reason, and saying how it's going to interact, and being able to help you select a specific strain or a specific product that has measurable amounts of the THC and CBD and other actives. And also the terpene profile plays a big role on whether it's going to make you more anxious, less anxious, make you more active. So these healthcare professionals who are running the show at PDI, they really made a big impact on my patients' lives. And I was able to refer to them, with a high degree of confidence, because once they left my hands, they weren't going to some shop that's just trying to sell as much cannabis as possible. They're going to a place that's trying to find, and maybe even, step by step, find the right type of product for that specific patient. So I love that model. It's unfortunate that we've kind of gone away from that, and taking the decision-making process or the guidance out of the healthcare professionals. But just understand, there's people like us, there's people like me, Nick, and Joe, who are here to help to guide you in the right direction to the limited ability that we can, even though I can't sell it to you as a pharmacist in my pharmacy. Going back before I started this rant, you talked about once the FDA allows us to do that, then I think that breaks down the wall that separates my pharmacy from a dispensary, and there could be a good potential there for especially independent pharmacists to get into that business, whether they're doing compounding or not, to be able to have that as a viable treatment option for their patients. I think is a positive.
All right, that takes us. It completes. I do try to keep these around 15 to 20 minutes. Clearly, we could talk about this for a lot longer. So I'll set up some more podcasts, and I'll reach out to Cortland. I'll reach out to you, as well as some other people that you recommended. And I also know there's somebody else who I think would be interesting to bring on, doctors, and he was an addict, and went and figured out his own treatment plan, much to the dismay of his doctors, but then they were all on board. So I think it's interesting. I think, and that just to me brings up the whole conversation. Like you said, it's less stigmatized, but how do you bring the doctors on board to support all this? Anyway, thank you so much for your time, Craig, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks everybody for participating, and I guess we'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Vivian.